You are standing close enough to hear him breathe. The hill is called Golgotha, the place of the skull. It is the middle of the day, but the light is going strange and thin, the way it does before a storm that never quite arrives. There is a smell of iron and dust and sweat. Roman soldiers are sitting a few feet away, throwing dice for a seamless robe, laughing at a joke you cannot hear. And above them, nailed to a beam of rough wood, is a man most of the world has already decided to forget. His lips are cracked. Dried blood has sealed one eye half shut. Every breath costs him something because on a cross you do not die from the nails. You die because your own body weight slowly makes it impossible to breathe, and to speak, you have to push yourself up on the very wounds that are killing you, which means every word this man says, he pays for. Most people think crucifixion victims screamed or cursed or begged. Many did. The Roman writer Cicero called this the most cruel and disgusting punishment his empire had. Men on crosses were not known for their eloquence. They were known for their silence and their curses. But this man speaks 7 times, 7 sentences spoken across the 6 hours he hangs there. And here is the first thing almost nobody tells you. You cannot find all 7 of them in any single gospel. Matthew has one. Mark has the same one. Luke keeps 3 that no one else recorded. John keeps 3 more. Put the 4 accounts side by side in order, and only then do the 7 appear. Like 7 stones laid out in a line, each one placed with intention. This is not a story about a punishment. This is not a story about a Roman execution. This is not a story about a man simply dying. This is a story about 7 sentences spoken by a dying man, and how each one was aimed with terrible care at someone who needed to hear it. One of those 7 will sound like the cry of a man who has lost his faith. It will sound like despair. It will sound like the moment God finally let go. It is the most misunderstood sentence in the entire Bible, and it may be the most sacred thing he ever said. We will get to that one, but not yet. First, you have to hear him forgive the men holding the hammer. The nails go in first, then the cross is lifted and dropped into its socket with a jolt that tears through every joint in his body. And in that first unbearable moment, when you would expect a scream or a curse or nothing at all, he prays, not for himself. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Sit with who them is. The soldiers who drove the iron through his wrists are, at that very moment, kneeling at the foot of the cross, gambling for his clothes. He can look down and watch them divide up the last thing he owns. And the first sentence out of his mouth is a request that they be forgiven. Here is what most people miss. He does not say, Father, forgive them, they'll be sorry someday. He says they do not know what they are doing. He is not excusing the crime. He is describing a kind of blindness, the blindness of ordinary men doing a job on an ordinary Friday with no idea whose hands they are nailing down. And into that blindness, he speaks mercy first, before he speaks to his mother, before he speaks to God, before he says a single word about his own pain. He covers his executioners. That is the first word, forgiveness, aimed at the people who least deserved it. The second word is aimed at a criminal. There are 2 other men dying beside him that afternoon, one on each side. Both are thieves or rebels. The Greek word suggests violent men, insurrectionists. And at first, both of them mock him. But somewhere in those long hours, something breaks open in one of them. He watches this middleman forgive his own killers, and it undoes him. He turns his head, and with what little breath he has left, he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Think about the faith buried in that sentence. He is looking at a man who is visibly, obviously losing, a man bleeding out on a Roman cross. And he calls that a kingdom. And the answer comes back, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. That word paradise is worth stopping on. In Greek, it is paradisos, and it did not originally mean clouds and harps. It came from an old Persian word for a walled garden, the private enclosed garden of a king, where only invited guests could walk. So when he tells this dying criminal paradise, he is not offering a vague someday. He is saying, today you walk into the king's garden with me, as a guest, by name. And here's where the tradition and the text part ways. You have probably heard this thief called Dismas. That name is real, but it does not come from the Bible. It comes from a later Christian text, centuries after the fact. The Gospels never tell us his name. They only tell us what he asked for and what he received. A nameless man, condemned and guilty, became the first person Jesus ever promised heaven to. And he did it from a cross, with a criminal's record still hanging over his head. The third word is not spoken loudly, it is almost private. Because standing near the cross, close enough to see everything, is a small group of women. And one of them is his mother. Try for a moment to be Mary. You held this child. You watched him take his first steps. And now you are watching soldiers kill him, and you cannot do a single thing to stop it. There is a particular grief that belongs only to a parent who outlives their child, and Mary is drowning in it, in public, in the worst way imaginable. He sees her, even now, even here. And next to her stands the one disciple who did not run, John, the one the Gospels quietly call the disciple Jesus loved. Of the 12 men who followed him for 3 years, 11 are gone, scattered, hiding. Only John stayed close enough to be spoken to. So Jesus looks at his mother and then at his friend, and he does something astonishing. In the middle of dying for the sins of the world, he stops to make sure his mother will have a home. "Woman, behold your son," he says to Mary, meaning John, and then to John, "Behold your mother." From that hour, the Gospel says, John took her into his own home. He is dying, and he is still thinking about who will take care of the people he loves. 3 words in. And do you see the pattern yet? Every single one of them points away from himself. Forgiveness for his killers, salvation for a stranger, a home for his mother. Not one of these first 3 sentences is about his own suffering. Every one is a gift, handed to someone else, from a man who has nothing left to give but words. Hold on to that pattern, because it is about to change. Let me stop for just a moment right here at the halfway point, because what comes next changes everything. If these 7 words are meaning something to you, if you have ever needed to be forgiven, or needed to forgive, or watched someone you love suffer and felt powerless, then do me one small favor. Subscribe, so the next of these studies finds you. And before you keep watching, leave one word in the comments. Which of these first 3 has been hardest for you to live out? Forgiveness, grace toward a stranger, or caring for the people you love when you have nothing left? Just one word. I read them, because we have heard him speak to his enemies, to a criminal, and to his mother. Every word aimed outward, every word a gift. But the sun is about to go dark, and the next thing he says will not be a gift to anyone. It will be a cry, and for the first time all day, it will be about him. For about 3 hours, he says nothing at all. Around noon, the sky goes dark. Not sunset, it is too early for that. The Gospels say darkness came over the whole land until the middle of the afternoon. Whatever it was, the effect is unmistakable. The light drains out of the world while the Son of God hangs dying, and for 3 long hours he is silent. And then he speaks again, but now the words turn inward. I thirst. 2 small words. It would be easy to skip past them. But stay with this, because they carry more weight than they seem to. This is the same voice that, according to John, spoke the world into being, the one through whom the oceans were made, the one who once stood in a boat and told a storm to be still, and it obeyed him. And now that voice, cracked and human, says the most ordinary thing a suffering body can say. I'm thirsty. There is a reason John records this one. Centuries earlier, a psalm had described a suffering, abandoned man whose enemies gave him vinegar for his thirst. John wants you to see the thread. A soldier lifts a sponge soaked in sour wine to his lips on the end of a stalk. The ancient words and the dying man line up. What was written long ago is happening in real time, in front of the very people who did not believe it could. But do not let the prophecy pull you away from the plain, terrible fact of it. He was really thirsty. His body was really failing. This was not a performance of suffering, it was suffering. God, in flesh, ran out of water. And then comes the 6th word, the one people put on wall art without ever knowing what it meant. It is finished. In your English Bible, that is 3 words. In the Greek, it is 1, Tetelestai. And here's the part nobody tells you. Tetelestai was not a word of defeat. It was not the sigh of a man giving up. It was a word people used in the marketplace. When a debt was paid off in full, a merchant would write this single word across the bottom of the bill. Tetelestai. Paid. settled, nothing left owing. When a servant finished the task his master had given him, he would come back and report with this word: "The work you gave me is complete." So when Jesus says this, he is not saying, "I am finished," the way an exhausted man collapses. He is saying, "It is finished." The it matters, the task, the mission, the thing he came to do. The whole reason God put on skin and walked into this. Done, paid, in full. Think about the difference. A man who says, "I'm finished," is a victim of his circumstances. A man who says, "It is finished," is a workman who has just completed exactly what he set out to accomplish. One is a surrender, the other is a declaration. For 6 hours, the nails had been telling one story: that this man was being destroyed, overpowered, defeated by Rome and by the crowd and by death itself. And with one word, he rewrites the whole scene. Nobody is taking anything from him. He is finishing something on purpose. Which brings us, finally, back to the sentence we have been circling since the beginning. The fourth word. The one that sounds like the exact opposite of everything you have just heard. Because somewhere in that darkness, before the debt was declared paid, before the calm of "it is finished," this same mouth cried out something that has troubled believers for 2,000 years. Now watch what happens next. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. He does not say it in Greek, the language of the Gospels. He does not say it in Latin, the language of Rome. He says it in Aramaic, the language of home, the language a child speaks to his father. And translated, it lands like a blow. My God, why have you forsaken me?" This is the fourth word. And this is the one I promised you at the very beginning, the one that sounds like a man whose faith has finally broken. For 2,000 years, people have flinched at this sentence. How can the Son of God ask God why he has been abandoned? Some have read it as the moment his humanity cracked. Others as the moment the Father truly turned away as the sin of the world came down on him. And there is deep truth in that second reading, but there is something else here, something you can only see if you know what he was actually doing with his mouth in that moment. He was quoting, because my God, why have you forsaken me?" is not a random cry of despair. It is a line. Specifically, it is the first line of the 22nd Psalm. And any Jew standing at that cross, hearing those exact words, would not have heard a man losing his faith. They would have heard a man reaching for Scripture in the worst moment of his life, and they would have known exactly which one. Now here's what almost nobody tells you about that psalm. It begins in absolute despair, but my God, why have you forsaken me?" But it does not stay there. Read it to the end, and the 22nd Psalm describes, with impossible precision, a man surrounded by mockers who wag their heads, a man whose hands and feet are pierced, a man whose bones are out of joint, who can count every one of them, while people stare and gloat and divide his garments among them by casting lots. Every detail. The piercing, the staring crowd, the gambling for his clothes, written centuries before Rome ever nailed a single man to a cross. And that psalm does not end in abandonment. It ends in victory. It ends with the promise that all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to God, that future generations will be told about him, that a people not yet born will hear what he has done. So when Jesus cries out that first line, he is not announcing that God has left him for good. He is pointing every listener who knows the Scriptures to the whole song, a song that starts in the dark and ends in the light. He is not saying it's over. He is saying, in the only shorthand a dying man has left, watch how this ends. This is not the sound of lost faith. This is not the sound of a man giving up on God. This is not the cry of someone who has stopped believing. This is the sound of a man clinging to the oldest words he knows. In the one moment they cost him everything to say. You may know this feeling more than you think. Picture a room you hope you never have to sit in. Someone you love is in the bed. Their breathing has changed, and you lean down closer than you normally would, because you know that whatever they say now, they may not have the strength to say twice. You want to catch the last words. You hold your breath to hear them. That is the posture the whole world is in, at the foot of this cross, leaning in, straining to catch what a dying man says. And what most of us gasp out at the end are broken, half-finished things. Fragments. A name. A word that trails off. Because dying takes everything, and there is nothing left for eloquence. But listen to how this man dies. After the darkness, after the quoted psalm, after the debt is declared paid in full, he gathers himself one last time. And the seventh word is not a fragment. It is not a gasp. It is a whole, complete, deliberate sentence. And he says it, Luke tells us, in a loud voice, which on a cross should have been impossible. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Notice what changed. The fourth word began, my God, the cry of a man in the dark. The seventh word begins, Father, the word of a child who is home. Between those two words is the entire distance from Good Friday's darkness to what he knew was coming. And notice the verb, I commit, I hand over. Nobody is taking his life from him. He is placing it on purpose into hands he trusts. This too is a quotation. The words come from another psalm, an old evening prayer a Jewish mother would teach her child to say before sleep. Into your hands I commit my spirit. It is the prayer you say when you lie down at night, certain you will wake up. He dies saying his bedtime prayer. The most tortured death Rome ever invented, the punishment Cicero said was too horrible to even describe to decent people. And the man on the cross meets it like a child lying down to sleep in his father's house, sure of the morning. Then he bows his head, and the gospel is very careful about the word it uses. It does not say his life was taken. It says he gave up his spirit. He handed it over. To the very end, he was the one deciding. 7 sentences, 6 hours, 1 dying man. So what do you actually walk away with? First, the plain fact most people never learn. There is no single page in your Bible where you can read all 7 of these words in a row. Matthew and Mark preserved the cry from the darkness. Luke kept the forgiveness, the promise of paradise, and the final prayer. John kept the words to Mary, the thirst, and it is finished. 4 witnesses standing in 4 different places, each catching what the others missed. The 7 last words are not a quotation from one gospel. They are what you get when you let all 4 testify together. Second, and this one is for you. Look again at who each word was for. The forgiveness was for his executioners. The paradise was for a guilty stranger. The home was for his grieving mother. Not one of the people at that cross had earned a single thing. And that is the whole point. If he handed out mercy and a home and a promise of heaven to the least deserving people at the worst possible moment, then there is no version of you that is too far gone to be spoken to. The words from the cross were never aimed at the qualified. They were aimed at whoever was close enough to hear. And the third thing, the one I hope stays with you after you close this, most of us will die the way most people always have, worn down, running out of words, our last sentence a fragment we never finish. But this man did not die like a victim of his death. He died like a workman setting down a finished task. He forgave on purpose. He saved on purpose. He provided on purpose. He quoted scripture into the dark on purpose. And he handed over his own spirit on purpose. From the first word to the last, nobody on that hill was in control of that cross except the man nailed to it. So here's my question for you, and I really do want your answer. Of the 7, which one reached you? The forgiveness of his killers? The promise to the thief? It is finished? The bedtime prayer at the end? Tell me below. Just tell me which one, and if you can, tell me why. Because in the end, it comes back to that one Greek word. The word a merchant wrote across a settled debt. The word a servant spoke when the work was done. Tetelestai. It is finished. 3 syllables. And 2,000 years later, we are still leaning in to hear them.